minute each to answer. You'll have a 1 minute close. Gabby has the time in front of you. You can begin when you're ready.
So bear with me, everybody. I'm a little bit nervous, obviously. We have a lot of great candidates running. But my name is Dylan Kelly, and I would really like to be the next MSCSA president and serve all of you in that function. I stood here 1 year ago today and asked all of you to put me on your governing council to be your student at large. And what I campaigned on was starting a conversation inside this organization, specifically around issues of diversity and fixing issues on the rift between metro and rural schools. And I want to sit here and say, I think we accomplished what we set out to do. I think that this year might have been a little bumpy at times, but we all showed up and we did it. And I greatly appreciate that we've all did it together, and I hope that we can continue to move forward, united and together as MSCSA. Thank you.
Question 1. What are your 3 biggest strengths as a leader, and how will you use those if elected as president of the MSCSA?
So I think my 3 biggest strengths are I'm always student-centric. That's part of what I have to do as a student at large. I have to go, I have to listen, I have to talk to students across the state. Unlike some of my other board members who are just region-focused, I have to travel all across. I have to go, northeast, southwest, and talk to you and figure out what issues are on your campus. My second thing is I'm a pretty pragmatic guy. I have a spirit that I want to have done, but I'm willing to work with anybody and everybody to make sure that we get progressive, pragmatic legislation pushed forward. And third, and I think the best thing about anybody is to have empathy. And I hope that, on my deathbed, everyone will say, he was a pretty empathetic guy. He sat and he listened to people. He was an effective listener. He sat and he was concerned about the issues that I cared about. And he stood with me. Well, I get so passionate. I'm sorry about this.
Please share one accomplishment of which you are proud from your time on campus, Student Senate, or MSCSA, and how can you use the lessons you learned from that to your advantage as president?
So I've been in this organization for 2 years now. My first conference was not last year, but the year before, at our October conference. And I decided, Student Senate politics, that's pretty fun and interesting, but I want to dedicate myself to the 2-year organization. And over these past 2 years, I've worked very hard to be as student-centric as possible and to realign this organization with those values. So my greatest accomplishment, though, is going across the state and building up student leaders and talking to them and say, you know what? You would make a great board member. You would make a great student president. You have the power that people for a long time have told you you don't. You might be a PSCO student. You might be a non-traditional student returning to campus. But when I sat there and I looked in their eyes and I said, you can do this, and I see them show up like all of you showed up today, that's my greatest accomplishment.
The leader of any organization must be able to make difficult decisions. Tell us about a tough decision you have made and how did you arrive at that decision?
Once again, as the GC student at large, my whole role is to constantly be in opposition on the board, to provide the perspective that maybe the majority of the board doesn't have or doesn't want to hear at the moment. We had a lot of issues regarding, diversity, specifically racial equity in this organization earlier this year. And it's a topic that a lot of students didn't want to talk about, and it was uncomfortable for a multitude of reasons. But there was a point where we were asking all of our campuses, and we were asking MSCSA to create internal diversity plans. And I sat back and I thought, this might cause a little bit more headache for most people, but I do firmly believe in showing up and talking about a problem. So I sat back and I sat down and I wrote up a resolution And instead, MSCSA is going to put their money where their mouth is, and we're going to have, for the first time in this organization, an internal diversity plan that's actionable for every student.
All right, question 3. Swipe 4. Managing conflict is an important part of leading an organization. Tell us about your philosophy on conflict management.
I think the basis of conflict management are fairness and empathy. And I'll use an example in my own personal journey. So I was on a Senate my first year, and we had a disagreement between the president and the vice president. And it got to a point where the president moved to remove that vice president in front of our General Assembly. Now, I had been very good friends with the president. We had known each other for a few years. We vacationed together, things like that. And I had to stand there in front of everybody because he asked me to oversee that vote. And I bet he was thinking that, I might help him out and get rid of this headache or pain in the neck. But I stood there and I stood firm and I tried to be as fair as possible for that removal vote. And afterwards, that vice president, who wasn't really happy with me at the moment, came up to me and said, "At least you gave me my fair shot." And I will always remember that. And that's my philosophy on conflict management. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Question 5. What are the 3 biggest policy issues facing MSCSA for the next year?
I think, obviously, the biggest policy issue that we have to fix is affordable higher education. I think that affects every single student across the state. And you're probably going to hear a lot of my other candidates, a lot of the other candidates say the same thing, because it's so important. And I was very lucky to be chosen to help start the Debt-Free College Initiative in this organization. And when that happened, we started and went across the state, petitioned with people to let them know that this issue affects everybody. The second big issue, I would say, are textbooks, because textbooks are a part of that. But I think that we can write a policy in that Debt-Free College legislation that affects that. The third biggest thing are issues around equity and inclusion. I think that this year and what this cabinet and staff have done have put us far beyond where we ever could go. But I think that we need to continue these conversations. We need to continue to show up and be together.
All right, and then a 1-minute closing statement.
All right, everybody. Thank you all for sitting here. I know we've got a lot more candidates to listen to, but I am sincerely asking for your vote. And the reason why I think that I'm going to be the best candidate to represent you and serve you is because I have the passion, I have the experience, and I have the proven record of doing stuff for you and serving you. So, on my first day in office, I want to create 3 ad hoc committees. 1 on student veterans issues, 1 on student poverty issues, and 1 on student mental health issues. I've heard, as you're at large, from students across the state that this organization doesn't take those issues seriously. And when I sat in the board meetings and people would say, "We don't take these issues seriously, why don't we do something about it?" Well, I'm finally going to do something about it. And I think if we do it together, we can finally put legislation next session in front of the Senate that will help these students, that will help our veterans, that will help our poor students, that will help our students with mental health issues. Thank you very much.